Welcome to the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show with Larry Lawson. As a former career law enforcement officer and law enforcement educator, Larry focuses on the use of tried and true law enforcement investigative techniques in conducting paranormal investigations. Despite his experience and training, Larry also keeps an open mind to discussions on topics that deal with evidence that are not quite as physical in nature. Paranormal Stakeout guests are professionals in the field of the paranormal and parapsychology, conducting the investigations and research needed to further the cause of paranormal study. Larry advocates an agenda of standardization of structure and training in the field of paranormal investigation and research for the purpose of one day being able to produce the evidence needed to convince a jury of the existence of the paranormal. Whether it is ghosts, UFOs, unsolved mysteries, hauntings or cryptids, no topic is beyond the investigative reach of Larry Lawson and the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show team. Now, here is the host of the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show, Larry Lawson.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout. I'm your host, Larry Lawson, coming to you from our headquarters in beautiful Vero Beach, Florida, where it's raining quite hard now. We're finally getting some rain down here, and we're very, very happy about that. But I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I've got a great show planned for you. As always, I try to bring on guests that cover a multitude of topics here in the paranormal, and tonight's no exception. I think you're actually really going to enjoy this show, but I do want to do some housekeeping. I want to make sure that you know that you can check us out on Facebook at paranormalfbi.com and indianriverhauntings.com. Those are our two Facebook sites that'll tell you what my group is doing down here in Florida and the southeastern part of the United States. You can also see us on Facebook at Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation and Indian River Hauntings. And if you want to see some really up close stuff about what we're doing investigative wise, you can check us out on YouTube at Indian River Haunting 2341, and that'll get you right to our channel. One thing that I do like to do in this show, and I'm encouraging all of you to drop me a line. Let me know what your thoughts are if you have any questions. And if you do have questions, I'm going to read them at the beginning of each show. And you can reach me for these questions. You can send it to ghostguy@paranormalstakeout.org. That's paranormalstakeout.org. And we'd love to hear from you, answer your questions right here on the show. Now, our guest tonight, quite a varied history and experience in the paranormal and law enforcement. Our guest, Chris George, tonight comes to us from Grand Junction, Colorado. He's actually from Leadville, Colorado, where he grew up and had several events as a child, seeing certain things in those old mining towns out there. He and his family moved to California, where he became very much involved with the Queen Mary that's docked in Southern California, and became good friends with renowned paranormal expert Peter James. And we'll talk about that tonight. During his time as a law enforcement park ranger in different parts of the country, he's been asked to investigate many strange things that have occurred in the parks. So with that, and he runs a group called APRO, and we'll talk about that tonight also. So with that, joining us by audio tonight is Christopher George. Chris, can you hear me?
I sure can, Larry. Thank you for that nice introduction.
Well, my pleasure, my friend. I'd love the folks out there to hear a little bit about who Chris George is. Tell us about your early experiences and where you're at today in the world of paranormal research and investigation.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I have. I'm 63 years old to begin with, and I would say the majority of my life has dealt with the paranormal in some form or fashion. When I was quite young, living in Leadville, which you basically said is a mining town, it was one of the largest mining communities back in the 1800s. And so there, if you ever go into that town, you'll see the remnants of the mines in the backdrop. But we lived right behind a mine, and it was just basically the tailings that was left. But one night when I was about, I'd say either 7 or 8 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night. It must have been around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I saw standing in my bedroom doorway whom I thought was my father. And he was about the same kind of build and height. So I automatically thought it was he. As I looked at him, I says, "Papa, what are you doing standing in my door?" And the entity, I guess you could call it almost a shadow figure because I couldn't see any detail, kind of cocked his head and didn't say anything. And I says, "Well, Daddy, why are you standing there?" And still nothing. And I even went as far as saying, "Boo, Daddy, boo." And it looked at me again, and then it turned and it walked in the direction of my parents' bedroom. The next morning I got up and I was eating breakfast with my father. And I says, "Why were you standing at my door?" And he looked at me real oddly and said, "I wasn't standing in your door." And I said, "Yes, you were. You were standing there. You were looking at me." He says, "Crazy kid, you were dreaming." No, I was not standing in your door. So I kind of more or less accepted it, except for the fact 2 nights later, my friendly shadow figure showed up again, but this time with another entity. And they both stood there looking at me. And now I never felt threatened or scared at all. And I started up a conversation. Of course, they did not respond, or at least I couldn't hear them. And after a while, they turned again and walked off. Now, the funny thing is that when they turned and they walked towards my parents' bedroom, right behind there was the mine. And so years later, I kind of put 2 and 2 together and summarized the fact that, goodness gracious, it more than likely was the spirits of 2 dead miners.
Now,
But
how old were you when this happened?
I was about 7 or 8 years old at the time. And even during that period, one other time I woke up and there was a strange blue light coming from the front of the house. And I could see it, and it kind of pulsated. And so I got up, being the inquisitive child that I was, and it was pretty much the dead of winter. And our house had 3 large panes up in the front, and you kind of look down onto the street. And so if you've ever put your head against a very cold window pane, you get that really cold shock. And I remember doing that distinctively. And I looked down and I thought I was looking at a huge owl staring up at me. I just remember the big eyes. And then as I noticed it, I just went dark. And the next morning I woke up in my bed. So I often wonder if I didn't have an abduction case. And I haven't had any since, at least that I know of. But whatever this was definitely huge. Well, huge, more larger than a regular owl.
Right.
And the sky was kind of that eerie blue look to it. And I knew it wasn't a dream because of the window pane. That window pane kind of reinforced the whole experience because it was so cold.
Did you think at the time that you were looking at some other entity, or when did you realize it wasn't an owl?
Probably a few years later, after I started watching some of the UFO shows, and it was the eyes that kind of sparked it. And to this day, if I look at a rendering or a picture of an alleged alien, those eyes draw me back to that moment. They almost look through you. And it was a very, very eerie experience. A lot of things happened to me as a child. I even saw Bigfoot at that point. And I think I was about 9 years old at that point. It was just before we moved to California. And we were at what they called Half Moon Campground. and it sits at the base of Mount Massive, and I got mad at my folks for something. We were camping and somebody said something. I don't even remember what it is, but I got mad and I stormed off. And this was about getting towards twilight. And there was a stream that was just down from the campground. And being a kid, I'm mumbling to myself and cussing my folks and my family and so on. And I'm throwing rocks into the stream. Now the stream probably was about, I'd say about 10 feet across. So it wasn't really all that big. And I heard this commotion coming through the trees. I heard the branches moving and a crunching sound. And I didn't really pay much attention to it. And then finally I got this overwhelming impulse to look across, and they're standing. And it was one of those situations where you start at the feet and you just keep looking up and up and up and up and up. And here was this Bigfoot. Now I thought it was a monkey, and I just kind of was laughing and everything, and it was making kind of a guttural noise. But again, I didn't feel threatened by it. In fact, it seemed very peaceful, and it just kept looking at me. It squatted down to where it could look across and see me at my level, and I just started asking questions to see if it would respond. And then finally, it got up and walked off, and then I went to the Queen Mary, and that's Long Beach, California.
And that's a whole different story. But so as a child, what you're saying is you've actually had experience on all three basic facets of the paranormal world: Bigfoot, UFOs, and ghosts.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you explain, especially at that young age? I mean, this is an unusual story. I think you'll agree, even amongst researchers. You had all three.
Right.
Do you have thoughts on why that occurred?
I think certain people are chosen. And by that, what I mean is not that we're any more special than anybody else, but we're tuned in more with, and probably we sent off a certain vibration, or basically our maybe our energy is more compatible and draws them in. Something is doing that, and that's one of the reasons that I became so fascinated with the paranormal, because the more I looked at it, the more I started realizing, hey, this is not a normal childhood. I'm seeing spirits, I'm seeing possible aliens, I'm seeing cryptids, and it all kind of gelled. And I thought, well, I'll just keep going with it.
Well, we're getting ready to come up on our first break, so I don't want to get too deep in this. So what you're suggesting is there's actually a connection between all these three entities. And
yes,
in the next 10, 15 seconds, what do you think that connection would be? How do you think they're connected?
I think that, again, if we want to call it spirit energy, if we want to call it just physical energy, something is at a different level than an average person.
Okay. Well, when we get back after this break, we're going to delve into that a little bit further. So folks, stay with us. Paranormal Stakeout with my guest tonight, Chris George. See you after these messages. And we are back on Paranormal Stakeout. My guest tonight, Chris George, joining us via audio. Chris, just before the break, we were having a very intriguing conversation, because you're probably the only person that I know that before adulthood actually had contact with three of the foundational issues in the paranormal world: cryptids, UFOs, and ghosts. And I find that fascinating. Now, you were beginning to explain your thoughts and theories on how, especially at your age, you had this connection. Can you go ahead and finish that thought?
Well, again, it just seems like something either activated something in me, or I was just multi-aware. They're kind of like, you hear about like with indigo children. They have a extra ability about themselves. To be honest, I almost want to feel that way. I'm not any more smarter than, say, the average person. It's just that personally, I am more aware. Certain things will come to me, thoughts that I wouldn't even think would be relevant at any moment, or something that I would think, and I'll get a thought about something. On one of the previous shows that we did, we were talking about the Antichrist and technology theory that I had come up with. Now, that came out of the blue. I have no idea where that came from. And it just seems like I'm tapping into something. I wouldn't say I'm communicating with anything, but I'm tapping into something. And I think other people can do that. People with ESP and so forth.
So what I'm hearing you say is there's almost a centralized repository, centralized brain, centralized energy that controls everything. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I would say there's a consciousness, kind of a galactic consciousness that some of us can tap into. And I will be sitting talking to somebody, and I call it a download. Actually, it's kind of ironic, but I'll be talking to them and they'll be explaining something to me, or they're kind of in distress. People come to me when they're having problems, because I'm a good listener and I have good advice. But when I give that advice, I will always turn my head and the information comes to me. And I just, again, don't know where that is or how I developed it. But I'm not psychic to the full extent. I get glimpses of things. When I go to an investigation, I'll get a picture in my head of an entity or what is happening in that particular area. I get almost like a pressure when something paranormal is about to happen. I feel rather heavy, and I know, okay, be aware something is going to happen. And sure enough, it does.
Do you think there's any connection to the theory of past lives with your situation?
Oh, absolutely. I've had a regression because, again, certain things have manifested themselves that prove to that direction. And I did go to an accredited psychic who actually, she was a very much a professional, had an office and so on and so forth, and highly recommended. And sure enough, I went through it, and I actually was very surprised at the results. And I think that may have a lot to do with it, is the fact, if we are reincarnated, if we choose, and I believe we choose to be reincarnated, we don't just automatically reincarnate, that we still have certain memories. I call it DNA memories that are still there. And a lot of our phobias are based upon that DNA memory. And it is one of those cases where you look at it, you examine it, and it's hard to believe, because I'm a very rational person, and it takes a lot for me to scientifically put the pieces together and examine it from that perspective. But in the regard of the, I was always very much afraid of water when I was a child. Not so much swimming pools, but the ocean. And I hadn't even, and again, this was during that period of my late childhood before I became a teenager. Never wanted to go. I hadn't even been to an ocean, let alone. But when I was in California, I would not go to the ocean. Now, you could get me in a swimming pool and I'd be fine. I think I died. Well, it was in a previous life in the ocean.
Interesting. And I'd like to, I don't know if we're going to have time tonight, but I'd love to talk to you a little bit about your thoughts on the reincarnation, because so many other psychics or folks that have that theory say that we don't choose to come back. It's just part of the learning process. So I find it interesting,
Yeah.
your thought that we choose it.
Yeah.
Why the difference in your mind, do you think? What evidence have you uncovered that we choose it?
I think that in the spirit realm, that's eternal. It's nonstop. There is no time. It's just existence as it would be. And I think that in that process, you got to kind of say, well, I'm not going to sit on the green grass and play with all the animals for eternity. You'd still want to do something. You'd still want to evolve in the spirit world. And I feel that by coming back, not only to this planet, but possibly other planets, other existences, it's like school. You start out in first grade, and then you keep going through different grades as you evolve. And I think that helps us become more enlightened beings. So eventually we no longer have to reincarnate. We have answers.
So your theory pretty much is in line with the others that I've heard. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's why some people are considered old souls compared to somebody that's new souls. They're more in lining of knowledge, like myself, and awareness. And I think that might be the process right there.
Interesting. Going to switch gears a little bit here because I want to get more in. So you've moved with your family to Southern California.
Right.
You begin the life there, and you get an opportunity to visit a very historic ship and meet somebody very important. Why don't you spend a couple of seconds sharing that with us?
Well, this kind of deals with the reincarnation question we were just talking about.
Okay.
I've always been fascinated by ocean liners. Yeah, ever since, again, a small child. I'd play with boats in the bathtub. So when I found out that the Queen Mary was there, I just was like in seventh heaven. I thought, this is great. And so I would get on the bus and sneak down to the Queen Mary. And I would go into areas that were not allowed by certain people, and especially the public. But I knew all the ins and outs and where all the doors were. I studied deck plans and so forth. So this one particular occasion, I must have been about 14 years old at the time. I'm in the back area, nobody's around, and I was actually crawling back between the rudder and the propeller area. And I completely covered myself in rust from head to foot. And I crawled out, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm proud of myself. I'm looking, and I'd heard all the ghost stories, and that was just so much, again, fascinating to me, second nature. And so I go walking along one of the corridors, and I go around the bend there, and I stop dead in my tracks. There's this gentleman standing there. He looks at me, I look at him, and he says, what are you doing here? And I looked at him, and I says, well, what are you doing here? And he looks at me again and smiles, and he says, I asked you first. And I says, very sheepishly, I says, well, I'm ghost hunting. And this big grin comes on his face, and he said, so am I. And he started asking me some questions, and that was the beginning of a very special relationship that I had with Peter James. And he was always known. He always had this white hair, but this very, very black mustache. And I didn't know who he was, but he had begun investigating the Queen Mary for various shows on TV and so on. But he allowed me to tag along with him. Every time he'd go to the Queen Mary, he'd pick me up and take me down, and we'd go investigate together. And then I would help him with his tours later on. And, he just was this really, really endearing man.
And he became well known for a lot of the disembodied voices as well as EVPs What show he was featured on? One television show in particular.
Right.
Well, which one was that?
That was Sightings. That was back in the 70s.
With Leonard Nimoy. With Leonard Nimoy.
No, actually that was In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy.
Correct.
But the only two shows, well, three shows that were on TV at that time was In Search Of, then Sightings, and then the one with Robert Stack, Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah.
So those were the three that started, and that was when the paranormal was not what it is today. I mean, you very seldom even spoke about it because people thought you were nuts. And but Peter really just educated me a lot of stuff, and I was witness to Jackie. I heard her just as clear as day calling out to him.
That was the little girl in the pool, right?
That was the little girl in the pool. In fact, I actually videotaped her one time years later when I was with my son on the Queen Mary, and I was walking down the hallway. Now there was nobody there. And the ship was almost completely empty. I hadn't seen anybody all night long. And I'm filming along, and I see it later on upon review of the video, I see this little girl down at the end of the hallway.
Wow.
And she starts coming towards me. But the thing was, she didn't have any legs. And so I automatically realized this must be Jackie coming down to say hello, because she probably remembered me when I was with Peter.
Fascinating.
And so I mean, it really surprised me. But I had so many images of spirits that I did not see as I was filming. It was later on.
We're getting ready to take our second break. Fascinating stuff and great story with Peter James. But when we come back, I want to hear about you and your career. So, folks, stay with us. This is Paranormal Stakeout. My guest tonight, Chris George. So we'll see you right after these messages. And we are back for this section of Paranormal Stakeout. Back with Chris George, joining us by audio. Fascinating stories, Chris, of all the things that have happened to you up to this point. But now that you've, as we go through your life cycle here, you're now in school, you're training, and you begin your career in the law enforcement field with the Park Service. So how did that all come about? And tell me how that fit in with all of your work in the paranormal.
Sure. Well, actually, there again, it's very strange because I had always wanted to be a park ranger. This all started relatively in the same period when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I had gone to a campground at the same location where I saw the Bigfoot. And it was a campfire talk by a ranger. Now, I didn't even know what it was. And so it was dusk. They had a big, huge bonfire in a pit. And all of a sudden, I saw this individual coming out of the dark woods towards me and my family. And he had the big ranger hat on. And he comes around and he starts talking about the stars and the Indian legends that dealt with the stars. I was captivated at that point. I thought, this is really cool. At that moment, I knew that's what I wanted to be. And so I moved to California. My poor dad, he always says, Chris, there's no way you can be a park ranger in a major city like Los Angeles. And that just made me angry. I thought, I'm going to show you. I'm going to definitely do it. And so I did. I went to college and I started studying in resource management and law enforcement, went to the academies and prepared myself to become a ranger. And I started basically at the very, very bottom of the totem pole. I started working at the gates, then I started doing tours, and then I finally became an armed park ranger. And the irony about it was that as I did this job, I started to encounter things that you would consider paranormal in many of the historical parks or some of the different varied locations. And it started just going hand in hand. I would look at it from a forensic point and a law enforcement point, and then I would look at it from the parapsychological point.
Mm-hmm. Well, what did you experience?
Well, in some of the buildings, where there was nobody there, you'd hear voices, which is kind of unsettling when you go in and you're by yourself and you're checking the building and you hear these voices and you can't locate where they're coming from. Shapes, different shapes I'd see. It really, it was like, okay, I know what this is, but from my point of view, wearing a uniform, it was like, okay, now you've got to act like a ranger. You've got to be very methodical and scientific in this approach. Do you have people in the building? Are you witnessing somebody that's hiding somewhere in the building? So you go through all of those processes and start checking them off. And then it's like, okay, then you need to get somebody else to hear it. So I'd call in other rangers, and sure enough, they would hear it or they would see the same kind of things. So it validated, and I knew I wasn't going crazy. So it really started to spark that. And so every place I was stationed, I started working in city parks, went to state parks, and then I went to the federal parks. And I spent quite a bit of time in the federal parks. And there, they had learned that I was interested in the paranormal. And it didn't even faze them. And
really?
Yeah, no, because at that point they had witnessed something going on in their parks that they couldn't understand. Now, they had heard about me going to UCLA when I was in college. And at that time, there was a paranormal department, which is no longer there. But it was, the instructors were an individual by the name of Carrie Gaynor and Dr. Thelma Moss. And they were involved in the entity case. And one of the things was that it was the hardest course I'd ever gone through. In all of my college courses, anything, this was the hardest because they started out debunking everything. We started learning about architecture, hydrothermics, biology. And I mean, you just name it, we studied it. And it actually thinned out the amount of students because it wasn't getting right to the fun stuff. But when I more or less graduated, I've got a BA in parapsychology, or a BS in parapsychology. And then I've got my BS in the resource management and law enforcement. So I've got 2 degrees, and it really helped me. But during that time, again, it was the early 80s. It wasn't what it was today. And the department was actually closed after a while after I had graduated. And because the board of trustees felt it was a bad impression to have something like that because it was wacko science. And so they went ahead and eliminated it.
Interesting.
But I mean, they used to call us the crazy kids, the spooky kids, because they knew we were going through, spending quite a bit of time in the paranormal department. But now you've got all these individuals out there that are just absolutely enthralled in it. But getting back to the Park Service, did you have a question?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm working in the Park Service, and especially when I got into the National Park Service, we get calls from other parks within the country. They had heard about me. And I was actually going by the pseudonym of Ranger Mulder because everybody was thinking Fox Mulder from the X-Files.
Interesting.
And so I was Ranger Mulder, and they really thought that was my name. And I'd show up and I said, "Hi, I'm Ranger George, Chris George." And they'd go, "Who?" I said, "Ranger Mulder." "Oh, okay." So
what kind of things would they call you in to investigate, and how would they get these reports? Were these people in the park seeing it? Was it other employees?
It was a mixture of everything. A lot of it dealt with the missing 411. And I'm sure many of your listeners are aware of that. That was what David Paulides started to investigate in regard to the missing people that just mysteriously disappeared in the parks. And these were people that were trained hikers, hunters, children, and they would just disappear. And they could not be found. But if they were found, they were miles and miles and miles away from the location, and very rarely were they found alive. And so yeah.
A quick question. Were you involved in what we now know is missing 411? Were you part of that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was one of the rangers, the secret rangers that David Paulides talks about, that he spoke to, because we were all concerned in the ranger service that the truth was not getting out there, that there was things going on in the parks that could not be explained, and it was dangerous. I mean, people's lives were being taken. And so we were told not to discuss it. Now, the Park Service is it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful place to go, any of the national parks, any of parks in general, state parks and so forth. But they've got secrets. And the Park Service didn't want it known because it would affect revenue coming into the parks, if people realized that the parks were not safe. And so we decided to go to David because we knew he was investigating it. And we were speaking very shyly and really basically under the cuff.
Interesting.
And the more that he started to explore, the more he found. And see, whenever we would have an incident, just like in law enforcement, you fill out a report. What you had witnessed, who your witnesses were, the circumstances and the outcome. We would do that. It would get normally filed, just a random, say a DUI or something, and it would get filed, go to the supervisor, get filed into the park records. If you had an encounter with something that was bizarre or paranormal in nature, you give it to the supervisor. The supervisor would put it in a separate file in a locked cabinet. Then a few days later, I call them suits, would show up and take those reports, and they disappear. You call to check up on it. There's no record. There is nothing to deal with it. Or if you had encountered something, the military would show up.
Really?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely.
Well,
go ahead.
Tell me in a couple minutes here, craziest incident that you investigated in the Park Service.
Oh God, we'd have to have 10 episodes for that. One that really stands out is I was in backcountry up at Yosemite with another ranger. We were on horseback, and we always go back, just make sure hikers and everything are okay. The environment's okay. If there's any wild predators around that we should be aware of. So it's usually about a week-long tour. We went out, and there was a lake, a huge lake up there in Tuolumne Meadows. And so I told my partner, I says, let's go ahead and circumnavigate, and I'll meet you at the far end, just make sure we got everything covered. So he agreed. And so we started out, and I get to the point where we're supposed to meet, and nothing. He's not there. And so I give him about an hour, just because I think maybe he encountered something. Well, an hour passes and I get worried. So I try raising him on the radio, and there's no reply. So I start to backtrack, and I have no idea. Well, off in the distance, I hear this horse whinnying, and I thought, okay, that must be his horse. So I went ahead, and I thought at first he was sunbathing on a big granite boulder, because he was on his back and he was at a slight incline. And I thought, well, this is, and I yelled out to him, and no response. And I got closer, and I got up against his other horse, and the horse was very jittery. And I went up, and I looked at him, and I knew right away something was not right. And I went ahead, and I thought, God, there's something that just didn't, it made me feel odd looking at it.
Yeah.
And what was.
What we're going to do is we're going to have a cliffhanger. We're going to have a cliffhanger here, folks. So stay with us. Because when we get back, I want you to finish the story.
Yeah.
Then I want to start talking a little bit about your organization. But we want to
Sure.
hear the rest of the story. So we're at a cliffhanger. So stay with us, folks, as you hear what happened to Ranger George's partner. We'll be back right after these messages. Stay tuned. And welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout with my guest tonight, joining us via audio, Mr. Chris George, Ranger Chris George. Before we get into the last interesting stories, just want to remind everybody you can check out the work that we do at the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation and Indian River Hauntings at our website at paranormalfbi.com and indianriverhauntings.com. You can also see our work on YouTube at Indian River Hauntings 2341, and you can see a lot of our videos. And of course, you can always find us on Facebook at Indian River Hauntings and Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. And Chris, how can folks find you?
They can contact me through our organization's email, and that is Anubis, Anubis, Paranormal Research Org at gmail.com. All one word.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So, wow. Got to get back to the story. So you're on a horseback. You and your partner out in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
And you don't hear from him for a while, but your horse, you go check it out and take it from there.
And when I was getting off the horse, one of the things that I did notice was that there was this very, very low hum. And I didn't know what it was, but it kind of made you nervous. And that's what was happening to the horses, I think, was whatever this vibrational hum was, it was affecting us. And so I went ahead and I looked at my partner and I thought, yeah, there's, again, something not right. And I went up to him and I thought, I'm going to check his pulse. And I picked up his arm to check his pulse. And it was just like rubber. It just flopped in my hand. And I went for, to try to turn his head towards me, and it just slopped over. And I called in backup because I was not sure what was going on. And they came in on helicopter, and we found out that every single bone in that man's body was pulverized. Not broken, pulverized. He was just basically a meat suit. And it just really shocked the heck out of me. And they went ahead and they took his body out, and I had to go back with the horses. And I was spooked. There was no explanation. At first I thought maybe he climbed a tree or something and fallen, but it would not pulverize your body. And I mean, right down to the smallest digit, it was just powder. And so, I mean, it really that was just one of many things that occurred.
So this ranger died in the line of duty.
Right.
He was a law enforcement ranger.
Right.
That usually sets off all kinds of bells and whistles when somebody in our business dies in the line of duty, especially mysterious like this. What happened? What steps did the Park Service take?
Absolutely nothing.
We had a family. I mean,
well, he did have a family, but then they went ahead and cremated the body before the family could claim it.
They cremated the body before.
Yeah.
Is he listed on the law enforcement memorial in Washington?
No.
How do they explain this is confusing to me, because how do they explain that?
That's the big thing. Everything is so secret. It really you're threatened if you say anything. They say basically that if you signed a non-disclosure act, and you're not allowed to talk about these things. The suits, as I said earlier, will reinforce that, and they tell you this never happened. And you go, okay. That's why when David Politis was checking into it, we had to be really, really cautious, because we were literally afraid not only for ourselves, but for our family. We knew that there was some horrible critters in Washington that was trying to cover this stuff up.
But what year did this happen?
This was back in about the mid 90s.
Can you tell us what park this occurred in?
Yeah, Yosemite.
Interesting.
Yosemite. And a lot of incidents have occurred at Yosemite. I mean, like I said, I could tell you volumes, because then that's when they realized that they had activities going on that they could not explain. So who could? And it got out that I had a good chance of explaining it, because nobody would ever deal or dwell with the idea of paranormal in a rational world. But here's Ranger Mulder, who's got some answers possibly that could do an investigation and be a professional law enforcement officer and deal with it, but then jump the fence and deal with it from a different perspective.
I mean, I would actually like to. Can you share his name? Are you able to share his name?
I don't think I want to, and just in regard to the family, in case they heard it.
Okay, I just want to honor his name. And
Yeah.
I get it. I just, I mean, that kind of hits home, because that's one of the most bizarre stories I've heard,
Yeah.
and it's frightening that could happen.
Well, the thing too, Larry, is like I was kidding. I really wasn't kidding when I said I always have trouble getting on shows like yourself and so on. It's almost like a lot of times somebody's blocking me. They don't want me talking about it. But I'm at such an age. I've gone through some medical issues. The truth needs to be told. And I'm not afraid of the government. I mean, they can do whatever. I mean, like I said, I'm not that long for this world anyway.
Have they put this kind of pressure on David Paulides?
I think to a certain degree, but he's become more public. And I think there's a mixture of truth and basically misinformation going on. So
from who? The government?
The government, absolutely. Because again, they don't want these things known. They don't want people to be aware that there is something out there that we cannot control. And it would not, it would really make the public doubt the government in protecting them, especially out in the woods.
Really, any more than they do?
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that it almost sounds like something you would see in a movie. It's so bizarre, and we always said nobody's ever going to believe this if we tell it, but it is true, and more of the Rangers are starting to come out and tell stories, their own versions of what's happening.
Well, I think we may have to have you back as maybe some of your partners and discuss this further, because this is a serious issue, especially if officers are dying in the line of duty.
Yes.
We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, and what I'd like to do is talk about your organization.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to get back to this Ranger thing, so we'll have to get back. We'll have to have you back and talk more. But I want to talk a little bit about your organization in the last few minutes. Tell us what it is and what you do, and how far-reaching are you? Well,
again, when I got into college, I started going out with various groups doing investigations, and in 1996, I and my son decided we'd start our own organization, and it's based on our logo and everything. The name is based on a kind of a combination of he and I. Anubis is actually the zodiac sign for my birth month. It's Leo, and in the sky, the Egyptians looked at the constellation Leo as Anubis, and so I kind of used that as my area, and then the moon that sits behind it is his. He was a moon sign, but also Anubis is the guardian of the dead, and it just kind of goes hand in hand. Now, we started with being here in Colorado, and as being a park ranger, I was stationed here for a while, and then went to California and started a chapter there. Went to Texas, started another chapter there. So wherever I was stationed, I'd start another chapter. Altogether, during that time, I think we had about 4 chapters. Today, 25 plus years later, we have approximately 12 chapters in the United States, one in Japan, one in Scotland, and just recently Canada. So we have expanded quite a bit over the course. But again, it's based upon the professionalism that sets standard for our organization. And each group is geared to dealing with issues in their areas, but the core foundation is based on APRO standards and policies. So everybody goes by that and reflects by that name. And it's becoming quite successful. We get people all the time wanting to start new chapters all over the world. And
well, how many members do you have right now of your organization?
We have approximately between 250 and 300.
Interesting.
It fluctuates, of course, but they're very committed to what they do. I have excellent directors that run each of the chapters. We're almost not even so much of an organization, but a corporation, which is kind of a funny thing because nothing else like this has ever been done. Where I mean, a group or two.
There's a few groups out there that are spread out, but
but not to the extent that we are, where we're encompassing the world. And it just is. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. And again, it's a lot of work. I have to say that for sure.
How do you keep everybody on the same page? I mean, if you've got a group overseas, how can you ensure that they are adhering to your protocols and your standards?
Well, each director is vetted. They have to go through a video process, like we're doing here. And the whole process, a series of questions, and check their enthusiasm. Make sure that they are fit for taking on a responsibility like this. And once I and my partner agree on it, then we'll go ahead and forward all of our materials, our manuals, our forms, our videos, the whole gamut. And then it's in their hands to gather investigators, team members, and we give them the structure of what we look at. We've got photographers, we've got tech people, we've got the investigative side, and so on. So each one is there, and they have to report to us each month with not only a video call, but also a monthly report that is broken down with everything that they've done. And if it's a big thing, like a business or something, they have to get approval first.
Fascinating, and so much more to go over. Unfortunately, we are out of time, Chris. We're going to have you back to discuss this a little bit more. But thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
Fascinating stuff, and we'll talk to you soon. And folks, appreciate you joining us tonight. A lot of interesting stuff here, a lot of stuff that we need to uncover more of. So stay with us, and for future shows, appreciate you being here. Please stay safe, love your family, and we'll see you on the other side. Have a good night.